Welcome to What Matters, a podcast that looks inward at unique experiences, upward for divine direction, and outward at God's activity in our world. I'm Michelle Funk, your host, and I'm so glad that you're here today. You are in for a treat. I'm delighted to introduce you to Stacy Webb, who joins us, a member of Resurrection at the downtown campus. And I'm actually just going to turn it to you, Stacy, and welcome you and ask that you might introduce yourself.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm delighted to be here with you. This is exciting. Stacy Webb, my husband and two children, and I moved to Kansas City in 2000 and actually visited Resurrection on a house hunting trip, and we've been here ever since. So when the call came to move downtown, we did it. And so we've been downtown at the downtown campus since the beginning, and that's been an exciting adventure. Most recently, I have been exploring with great enthusiasm the Enneagram, and Suzanne Stabile happens to be my very favorite Enneagram master. And so I'm delighted to be here today to kind of be a little appetizer for the work that she is going to be sharing with us at the conference.
Yes. So Suzanne Stabile is going to be part of the Inspired for Life conference coming up February 19th and 20th. And so we're getting an inside peek today on her work and what the Enneagram is and how we can find it useful for our own lives and all of the wonderful teaching of it. So this is our sneak peek, and then of course we'll learn more from Suzanne herself at the conference. But why don't you just kind of walk me through from the very beginning? What is the Enneagram? We hear this talked about a lot right now. I don't think it's anything brand new.
No, not at all. No, but it certainly has taken on popularity of late. And I was first introduced to it, excuse me, about a dozen years ago at the downtown campus. And Marilyn Hutchinson, who is a clinical psychologist, taught the Enneagram for us as a class. And so that was my first taste of it. It was a different season of life then, so I wasn't diving in quite as much as I have of late. But it's an ancient typology, personality typology wisdom. And it was passed down from Christian desert fathers and mothers in the 4th century. It was taught, it was an oral teaching. So it was taught by teacher to student only, for the student's personality, for the student's self-awareness and growth and journey. Over time, psychologists and psychological research came into play and kind of layered over all of that ancient wisdom. And so that's the basis for what we're studying now as the Enneagram. But it's a journey of self-awareness. I've been a personality junkie for a long time. I used to be the girl who did the tests in the teen magazines and all of that kind of thing. So I've loved all of that kind of work. I'm fascinated with people. But the thing that I think I love about the Enneagram so much is that it's a little bit different than a lot of the other studies, because once you find out what this typology says about your personality, it also gives you a path for growth. It teaches you the why. Why do we do? Why do we feel? Why do we think the way that we do? And then as we do the work, and as we look more inward and discover more things about ourselves, and as we connect with God through the work that we're doing, over time, there is growth that we experience and the transformation that God does in our hearts as we kind of let go of things that have been limiting to us and held us back through our lives, and allow that kind of growth and transformation to take place. So I find it to be just a fascinating and powerful, powerful tool to help us become the best versions of ourselves.
Yes, yeah. I love your phrase, the path to growth. Suzanne Stabile, who we mentioned, maybe that's why she calls one of her books The Road Back to You.
That's right.
Yeah, because it is some self-discovery, but it's also something that you travel.
That's
this
exactly
path,
right.
that you grow in.
And there's a different path for every type, because we all have different needs. We have different baselines for what kind of personality layers we have placed on ourselves. There are, and therefore there are different needs that we have, and there are different paths that we need to go down to kind of understand more about ourselves. And with that, we gain more compassion for ourselves, And as we do this work, especially as it's laid out now, where we can actually study other types as well, that opens us up to the understanding of the lens through which other people see the world. We don't all see the world the same way. And that opens up compassion to understanding and better communication. And then what we take from that, we take out into the community and into our relationships. So it's just got so much power.
Yeah. Yeah, because the more that we know about ourselves, the better we are able to relate to others, and our relationships with others, our loved ones, our friends, our neighbors, our community just becomes stronger and more healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, so here's what I know about the Enneagram.
Okay.
It is this fabulous tool. It's ancient. It has standing with it, and then it does involve different types.
Yes.
All right. So shall we dig in?
Do we want to talk about different types?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have some notes for that
Absolutely,
because
as you
that's a
should.
lot of information.
Yeah.
But because we're talking about Suzanne and referencing the work that she's done, the descriptions that I took here to talk about with you today actually come from The Road Back to You.
Okay.
And she wrote that book with Ian Morgan Cron.
Yes.
So this is kind of the quick description of the different types. But one of the things that I like to add that everybody doesn't always talk about with the Enneagram is that reflection of God within each of us.
Yeah.
The authentic self that we are born to be, that purest form of ourself, that essence that we are, actually reflects characteristics of God. And I know as a child you learn that we're created in God's image. And I think in my childhood eyes, I saw that to be, the physical image, like arms and legs.
Yeah.
But what I have learned is that we are reflecting character of God, that He is within us, and that we reflect the character of Him into the world. In that essence, that most authentic self, that's that pure form of that. And so each of the types actually has a reflection of God that is associated with it. And I really like to include that because as we do our work and as we start to shed some of the adapted self and come into the authentic self and live out of that essence, then we're actually reflecting those characteristics into the world. And how much better are we? And how much better is the world when we do that?
Absolutely.
So I wanted to share that along with it, okay?
Yeah.
So our type 1 is known as the perfectionist. And some people, I'm going to say this ahead of time, some people have a little bit of trouble with some of the titles.
Right.
And so I say take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Look at the type and talk about and learn about the different characteristics that are associated with the type. But the title, the name of it, isn't as important as the characteristics and the traits. But the type 1 is called the perfectionist, and they're known to be ethical and dedicated and very reliable. They're motivated by a desire to do good and right in the world, and they desire to avoid blame and fault and being less than the most perfect and right version of themselves.
Yeah.
And the reflection of God in that type 1 is goodness and rightness. So you can see living out that goodness and rightness when we can shed the layers of the things that we do to protect ourselves over the course of our lives.
Right.
The type 2 is the helper, and they're known as being warm and caring, and they're givers, definitely looking at the needs of other people over themselves, motivated by a desire to be loved. Being loved and needed is the most important thing, and relationships, therefore, are priority for the 2s. And they have a tendency to pass off their own needs, to put aside their own needs. So acknowledging those is very, very difficult for the 2.
Yeah.
The type 3 is called the performer or the achiever, and they're very success-oriented and image-conscious. They set goals and they achieve them. Very productive people. They have a desire to be seen as successful and a real need to avoid failure at all costs.
Yeah.
And so within the type 3, we see hope and radiance or glory as the reflection of God.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that pretty?
Yeah.
I like that
Now,
one.
what was type 2's reflection of God?
Love and nurture.
Love and nurture.
Love
Okay.
and nurture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. So
All
the
right.
type 4 is known as the romantic, and they're creative and sensitive and very deep feeling. One of the descriptions that I've read about the type 4 is oceanic feelings. I really like that, the depth of feeling that they that they carry. And they're motivated by a need to be understood and experience authenticity. 4s have a tendency to see themselves as missing something. There's a journey there to discover what's missing in them. And that is this journey for authenticity and this desire to be unique, but yet understood by those that they love, those that are close to them. And so their fear, their avoidance is being ordinary. They don't want to be like everybody else. But the reflection of God in our type 4 is creativity and beauty.
Yeah.
So I love that one too.
Yes.
I have a close type 4 in my life. Type 5, the investigator, is an analytical person, very observant, have a tendency to be private. And they're motivated by a need to gain knowledge. Knowledge and information for the type 5 makes them feel prepared for the world. It's a safe feeling to have enough information to be able to face the world equipped.
Right. Yes.
And they avoid relying on others. That's something that makes them uncomfortable in a lot of ways. But what we see in the type 5 as a reflection of God is wisdom and truth. They're after the information to gain the wisdom and to find the truth.
Yeah.
The type 6 is called the loyalist, and they're committed and questioning, always preparing maybe for the worst or preparing for the next situation. They're motivated by a fear, a need for security, and they avoid uncertainty. So therefore, gathering that information, being prepared for whatever may come. There's a 6 that could be a worst case scenario thinker, and there's a 6 that is going to be prepared for the next thing and maybe even challenge authority a little bit in that way. Faithfulness and courage is the reflection of God in that type 6. And I love that they're associated with fear, but their reflection of God is courage.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah.
In the type 7, the enthusiast, these people are fun and spontaneous, adventurous, and always optimistic. So we see that they're motivated by a need to be happy. It's difficult for a 7 to sometimes sit in the more difficult situations. They're looking, as my husband would say, over the next hill. He's a 7, looking over the next hill for the next opportunity. And they love to think and plan, stimulating experiences, maybe even planning that trip is as important, as exciting as going on the trip. And so they're avoiding is pain and limitation. That's that forward movement is keeping them out of those things that are less comfortable. But what we see as a reflection of God is joy and abundance.
Nice.
Yeah, I like that one too. I like them all. Type 8 is the challenger, commanding and intense. These people take up space in the room, and it's you notice them. They're not demanding the attention, but they are commanding the attention. They're motivated by a need to be strong. They need to protect the vulnerability inside them. That is the thing. They don't want to show their weaknesses. They need to demonstrate that strength in order to protect themselves inside, because they do have a really tender part inside. And the reflection of God is power and protection.
Nice.
Yeah. And finally, the type 9 is the peacemaker. And these people are, they're calm and laid back in presentation. They're accommodating. They can kind of move, almost even merge with people around them or a significant other. They're doing that. They're motivated by this need to keep the peace and to maintain some balance, and they avoid conflict. And what we see as the reflection of God is peace and oneness. So that's a little synopsis of our types.
Right, a grand overview of the different types. I want to be a little bit of all of them.
Yes, and we are.
And we are,
Yeah, and we are.
Right, but one particular type kind of rises to the surface, doesn't it, within each of us? And it's a bit of a discovery process to find that.
It is.
Do you want to kind of share, like, where do you begin to kind of start that process, and what are maybe some things to avoid? I mean, I've heard, like, you don't want to type other people.
Exactly.
As you're going through the list, I'm thinking of people I know.
We all do.
And I'm like, oh, I know for sure that, that person is a particular type, but that's probably not very fair.
It's interesting because the teaching would say we can't type other people. Right. It is their journey. Yeah. And what we know about the Enneagram is that that learning your type is so much about the motivation of your of your type. Okay. And so we can't really know what someone's motivation is. If we see 2 or 3 people kind of doing the same thing or acting in the same way, they might all 3 be motivated by different things. And so that's one of the reasons that we want to recommend that we don't type other people. But as we're learning, it's certainly normal for us to notice those kinds of traits and wonder about. And, it's not harmful at all to ask questions or to learn about the communication style of a type like that, because that can just only benefit a relationship that you're in. Yeah. So there's no harm in that. But saying that somebody is something is a little bit harder to do. Yeah. But as far as the journey, there are lots of ways to go. Tests are very, very popular, and there are free online tests, and there are very elaborate online tests that have fees associated with them. There are very prominent scholars that subscribe to some of the tests. My personal thought is that tests are fun. They're dinner party conversation, they're coffee conversation, and go ahead and do that if that's something that's interesting to you, or if you're doing it with a friend, or you're doing it in a lighthearted way. But I've learned to share with people to just hold that result loosely. Part of that is because if you get different numbers in a test, if there's the highest number and then a second number, people tend to think that this is my main type and this is my wing, and that is not an accurate look at the typing and how we draw from the different types. We do draw from all the different types, and there are lots of ways that we do that. But it's it kind of leads us down a path where we think that and maybe even try to fit in to the things that we have learned about that type. What I like to do is to present to people a couple different things. There's a stance. There are 3 stances. The Enneagram's done in triads. If you've done a little work on it, you already know that a lot of things are done in 3s. Yeah. So I like to look at the stance, and there is an aggressive stance, and a dependent stance, and a withdrawing stance. So there are 3 stances and 3 types within each stance. So we talk about how those people respond in the world. And then I like to look at the centers of intelligence. So we have the head triad, and the heart triad, and the body triad. And there are 3 types in each of those. Yeah. And when I'm talking with clients one-on-one, or talking about it in a workshop, we can go through the details, or general details of each of those stances, and general details of each of the centers of intelligence, and where those things intersect is a good place to begin. And it's really so if you're I'll use mine, a dependent stance, which means that you move toward people, you're very other focused, but you are responsive. You respond to the world with feelings first, and are intuitive about feelings of other people. So that's the dependent stance and the heart triad, and that intersects at the type 2. Okay. So I think that's a good place to start. And then you can look at the motivations of those types, but that's a good place to begin to study. And then you can see if you're impacted by wings, which is the type on either side of your main type. You can look at the stress and security numbers, which are different places that you go in those times, and you draw traits from those other types to help you through your time, whether it's a time of struggle or whether it's a time of security and self-care and that kind of thing. So there's lots of movement around the circle of the Enneagram. Yeah. And do you wind up with, I know I'm maybe if you don't mind, a 2, I know I'm a 2. Or do you sometimes land on something and then have to do a little bit more discovery to really fine tune that? Or, absolutely. In fact, I think that there are stories about, several of the authors and Enneagram scholars that we read with great confidence, who took a while to decide what their actual type was. And you come into it with a certain amount of self-knowledge, And as you explore, you start to see maybe other things that seem more authentic to you. And so there, holding yourself open to observing behaviors, observing your feelings and what's happening in my body and what's going on around me, and learning to be present. That's all the kind of practice that it takes to start to become a little bit more self-aware. And as you do that, you can see your shifts. You can see the things that don't really serve you anymore. But it's a process. And you can land on it, but I think when I was first introduced to it, I would have told you that I kind of associated myself with the type 9. And there are a lot of similarities, and there are certain types that do mistype.
Yeah.
But as you study, you kind of, and it was the motivation for me that really helped me understand my type better.
Did something just strike you? It's like, oh, now I get it, or was it more of a gradual process of, I hear you say observing, and this getting to know yourself a little bit. Why is that so hard sometimes? Why can't that be easier?
One of the things that they do say about the Enneagram is that the things that you find the most difficult to see about yourself are the things that help you understand your type. It's the things that are uncomfortable. We all have the part of ourselves that we put out to the world that has been pretty well cultivated. Right? And then the part that we call the hidden side. It's referred to as the hidden side in the Enneagram a lot of times, or the shadow side. And those are the things that we've come to protect, learn to protect. And that is the basis of our personality. We're born in that pure state. But as we introduce ourselves to the imperfect world, we learned that we need to protect ourselves from some things. There may be some things that we needed that weren't served to us, or ways that we needed to be understood or seen that we weren't understood or seen. And it can be something that's direct. It could be from a caregiver or a parent or someone in authority in our lives. It could be something that was directly said or done. But it can also be the way that we take those things in, and the way we assimilate it and try to make sense of it. And what do we think that we need to do about it? And how do we protect ourselves? It's kind of it's survival techniques really for children. And we all do it. There are no perfect parents. There are no perfect people. We're all going to be, no matter how great your childhood and how warm and fuzzy, we all have some stuff that is a part of our life. And those are the kinds of things that start to build and protect and layer on.
Yeah. And so identifying those takes work, but is helpful. Yeah. And so some of the work of that can be done with help.
Yes, it can. It absolutely can.
Yeah. And even in just conversation with trusted people.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are other tools, journaling or, praying.
All those things.
Yeah.
All those things. Another one of the things that Suzanne Stabile says is that this kind of work, Enneagram work, is personal work best done in community. So you do your internal work, you read a good book, you work with a coach, you do some meditation, you listen to podcasts, you work with friends, doing study with friends. But if you do it in community, and what's so beautiful about that is that we learn from one another, from our stories. And I think that's one of the things that is so comforting about the way Suzanne teaches, is that she teaches with stories. And so we learn about other people from other people. And we learn about ourselves from hearing the stories of other people.
Yeah, right. And same with our faith. Best done in community.
Isn't it?
I think we just need one another to be able to observe one another and speak some truth, with love and grace and gentleness and honesty. But because I can only observe myself so long.
Yes.
And then I need somebody else to speak into that, because I don't want to keep looking very closely.
It is something, though, that I think that's a really good point. I think that it is something that we need to recognize has a pace.
Yeah.
We have our own pace. And the way we explore and the way we look at ourselves and learn about ourselves you might want to dive in and kind of huddle up for a little while, but then maybe it requires a walk on the beach after that. I don't know. But,
Right.
but taking a break and having just some reflection time. It doesn't all need to be study time. Reflection time is a really, really important part of this step.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So when you encourage people to get started, so maybe pick up a book and start that is a great first step. So, and I know Suzanne has written some other
Yes.
books. Tell me, you know a lot about Suzanne Stabile and her work.
I am a fan.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's
am
fine.
a fan, and as I said, I love the way she teaches. She's my favorite teacher, and I think it's because I can identify. She brings in her faith. She tells stories. She reflects on her family. She reflects on herself in a vulnerable way, and so it comes out of just being in the head, where the psychology and clinical teachings are, and comes into the heart, which is exactly the place that I relate. So that's a little bit of explanation on that.
Yeah.
But I think I often recommend The Road Back to You. It's a great introductory book, and it's written with light humor, at the same time explaining to us how we need to look at both the public side of ourselves and the more private, more hidden part of ourselves.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows us how to do that. And it has a great, at the beginning of each chapter of each type, it has a great little assessment, if you will, like some statements about what that type is like. So you can take a one-page glance and see if that makes some sense to you. I would encourage you to read them all, not just the type that you associate with the most, because that's how you get the greatest knowledge. And again, too, because we see that we can access traits from all of the different types.
Yeah.
It's really great background information for all of our relationships and all of our community work, as well as our self-awareness.
Yeah.
And then I love her book, The Path Between Us.
Okay.
That's a great relationship book, and it highlights things about what we need as types and what we're looking for in relationships and how those things can come together and how we can serve one another in relationships. I recently heard on one of the, she's got a podcast called The Enneagram Journey. And I recently heard on one of her podcasts that she's got another book coming out. I don't know the title and I don't know when, but we can be looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And then The Enneagram Journey is a great podcast where she brings on people of all different types. And then they also have kind of almost like an open mic kind of thing from time to time where people will call in with their questions or they'll ask about certain types. So it's a really great learning tool.
Yeah.
So I think all of those things are good. There are lots of wonderful books out there. There are books about working with kids, and there are books for millennials. There are all kinds of great books out there, and I happen to love the ones that really work with the heart and the body as well as the head knowledge. As a 2, I'm a repressed thinker, so that's probably why.
So as a 2, what have you found knowing this about yourself? What has that been real helpful in? Can you describe like a situation or a story or interaction where it really was beneficial for you to know a little bit more about yourself as a type 2?
I can actually. So you may know that I was one of the owners of the bakery 3 Women in an Oven with Jane Torline, who's also a member of our church. And so we sold the bakery in 2018.
Yeah.
And so that was I promised myself a good time of reflection and some self-care. And I really wanted to get into developing my spiritual life and then worked to discern the next steps that God had for me and in the work that I would do or the call that I would have. And I realized as I was doing that work that the self-care was something that I was just crying out for. And as a 2, we put our needs on the back burner. In fact, it's very difficult for us to acknowledge them.
Right.
And so what I learned is that during that time, my desire to do that was working into my security side, which is drawing on that type 4. And that's a place where you can feel your emotions, feel your feelings, explore what you think and feel about things. And that was a really, really important part of my journey. On the converse side, when our children were younger, say they were in middle school or high school, we have a funny story telling on me in our family, but when the kids had pushed me just too far They used to say that the 10-foot fire-breathing dragon would come out of me. And what we know now is that that is moving to my unhealthy type 8 and expressing my anger. And so that's a reflection there to be able to recognize. And now, as I have done so much exploration, I can recognize when I have the needs and take the moment to stop and take that deep breath and pay attention to what I'm feeling and what's going on and what might have happened around me, what might have triggered that, or what's happening in my body. How am I responding? Am I responding to shame, which is a thing in the heart triad? Yeah. Am I responding to something that is building resentment or causing some anger? It's pretty easy for me to recognize the emotions of feeling joy and love, and that just kind of exudes. That's a part of who we are as twos. But but those are a couple of examples of the experiences that I've had with stress and security.
And you said for the two, the reflection of God is it joy and love?
Love and nurture.
Love and nurture. So you can also celebrate those times after the fire-breathing moment of coming back to love and nurture.
Yes, we do all have very good relationships, so it's worked out over time.
Absolutely. I might adopt that. As I learn more about the Enneagram, I think I'm going to look into this fire-breathing part to be able to call upon as necessary. Oh, well, I know it's not near enough time to really talk about the Enneagram and give it its due, but I'm so grateful for what you've shared and the overview you have provided. And I love the component, this element of there is a reflection of God in each and every single type, as it should be. I mean, we are created, like you said, in God's image, and that includes our feelings and our thoughts and our emotions and just all kinds of interactions that we have. And the whole idea is that we can relate better to others, have healthy, strong, beautiful relationships. And the more work that we do to advance that, the better this world is going to be. And so that's how we just come right alongside God in the journey of relating to others in our world.
Yes.
It's kind of what it's all about.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any parting words? What would you say to, about the Enneagram? Just jump in and do it. Take your time. You'll find some answers, and it will matter. I mean, I'm putting words into your
that's okay.
mouth. Yeah.
I do think that I would like to share that it really is for everybody. It really is for everybody. Everybody will start at a different place. But that journey for self-discovery, that journey for self-awareness is such an important one. And I think it's a gift that you can give to yourself too. Recognizing the best part of yourself and growing into living into what God has for you to be. That's a gift that you can give to yourself by investing just a little bit more time with reading or listening or just taking a few moments and paying attention to how you're feeling and what's going on inside of you in any given moment and being present.
Beautiful. Stacy, thank you. Thank you. And that's what matters about the Enneagram and how it's such a beautiful tool for us to explore. And as you just said, to invest some time in traveling that journey. So I just want to encourage us all to take a look at the Enneagram and do that work and learn more about it and about ourselves so that just as we've talked about, we can become kind of the purest version of ourselves for our own health and happiness, but also for the world. So yay. So thank you very much for joining us in the What Matters podcast. Please subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And once again, I'm just so grateful for your time, Stacy. Thank you for being a part of this today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we'll see you next time. Oh, that was awesome. I love the way you described it and just kind of gave us all of the beautiful parts of the Enneagram.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know it's a challenge to go through that process.